Hey, welcome to the Rabid Atheist. I am Ed Raby, your host, former pastor turned to atheist, now compassionate anti-theist. So, welcome to my channel. Welcome to the live stream. I'm going to start off with just letting everybody know. I appreciate everybody's patience this week. I didn't really create any content this week, and mostly it was just me getting some much needed rest. So there's that issue. So I feel much better. Mostly, I don't think I ever shook off the after effects of when I got sick there for a couple days, and it was just lingering and lingering. And taking the week off and just resting and relaxing has been very, very beneficial. So thank you very much for all that. I appreciate it. Today, last week, I got a comment that I didn't really deal with because it was so long. um, the public wants to know, Fred. Yes, most of us do. Um, I got this comment, and it it's a long one. I almost too long didn't read it, but because a lot of it seemed very cut and pasty. It's from a theist, and I'm going to deal with this whole comment hopefully tonight. But um, the last few questions are kind of interesting. He addresses me directly. He compliments me that I have an astonishing philosophical mind. Well, thank you very much. I'm not sure about that. I guess I've studied logic and philosophy enough where it just has wore off on me, I guess. But he wanted me to share the things that makes a pastor go atheist. So why did I turn atheist? What makes a pastor turn atheist? Now, it's a more general question, I suppose. It could be any pastor. Um, but I have already talked about this at length, and I've got a new episode of that at the end of the year where I'm going to add what I've learned in 2024 from being deconverted for another year. And hey, Joey. Hey, Paul. But if I were to give the long story short version, my faith, my religion, my Bible didn't line up with reality. That's the bottom line. I'll deal with what it's not first, because I get this all the time. You were never really a Christian, and the reason you left was some bad trauma, emotional experience, because that's the current apologist trope out there right now, that the reason atheists are atheists is because they're angry, right? We're angry atheists because we left the faith because, whatever. And, we had this bad experience. Well, that wasn't it. It's hard to have a bad experience over a period of, 20 some years. Okay. But it was a 20 some year process that actually started it started in Bible college, because I began to I started studying the Bible to get a degree in it. And our professors actually made us do that. Uh, um, and the more I studied the Bible, the more I realized that just got to be crap. It's garbage. The contradictions began to come up. I took a class in Bible college called apologetics, and I was exposed to all the arguments for the existence of God, all the philosophical ones. They haven't changed, by the way, since I went to college in the early 90s. And guess what? The arguments for the existence of God haven't changed at all. Even the Coulomb cosmological argument is kind of a rehash of an older argument that certain people have brought back to life. William Lane Craig brought it back to life. And well, we don't believe in random chance, so your accusation is automatically false. Just dealing with this comment. So, you might want to come up with an actual accusation that actually deals with what atheists actually think instead of your trope responses. Okay. So there's that. But as I went through Bible college and I studied the Bible and I took apologetics class, and uh, I was exposed actually to precept apologetics back then. Um, there was some apologist that kind of went forward with the precept idea. So presuppositional apologetics isn't new either. It's been around. Um, so I don't have that notion at all that apologetics is doing anything new. And that became disappointing to me, okay, very early on. And after Bible college, I went to seminary because I still had a lot of questions. Okay, well, I'll get up to the higher level and maybe they'll have better answers. And they didn't. Okay, it was the same arguments, maybe a little bit more sophisticated. But, I actually took a class called The Problem of Evil. Um, I feel okay, first of all, I don't have to give reasons why I don't believe any more than if you're a Christian and you don't believe in Odin or Thor, I'm not going to ask you for reasons not to believe in them. I don't believe in the biblical God, and that's because the evidence is unconvincing. It's quit reversing the burden of proof and give me evidence for your God and give me evidence that the Bible is real. Okay. That's on you. That's not on me. Okay. The atheist is just a default position when you don't really have a God to believe in because there's no good evidence for it. Okay. I love how apologists like to do that, but it's crap. Uh, I don't have a burden of proof for non-belief. Okay. For what? Okay. I don't have a burden of proof. Okay. I don't. Okay. You're the one making the claim. I don't have to prove. Okay. Fine. If you want me to give a burden of proof, then I want you to prove that all the 3,999 other gods that exist don't exist because you don't believe in them. I don't believe in your God in the same way you don't believe in them. Do you have to provide proof that they don't exist? No. Okay. I accept the fact that you don't believe in them and that the evidence isn't compelling for them. Okay. So you have to accept that I don't believe in all 4,000 plus whatever there is. Okay. I do not have the burden of proof on me. You do. Okay. Um, this is a typical apologist tactic to get us off the topic of whether your God exists or your Bible is true in order to avoid dealing with that discussion. It's an avoidance tactic and it's dishonest. Okay. Um, so it's, give me proof for your God and then I won't be an atheist. Okay. At that point, I mean, you have the solution right in front of you. Prove your God exists, prove the Bible is true, prove Jesus died on the cross, whatever it is you believe, prove that, and then beyond a shadow of a doubt, and we wouldn't even be having this discussion. Okay. But you don't have to do that. It is absolutely dishonest. Okay. Trying to reverse the burden of proof is dishonest. Okay. You're the one making a claim that God exists. Prove your claim. Okay. I'm not making a claim. I'm just saying your evidence is unconvincing. So, um, I mean, there are atheists who'll make that claim that'll make that argument with you, and there's plenty of them. So you can go around and deal with them. But getting back to the topic at hand of why a pastor turns atheist, after a while, I got out of seminary and started going into the ministry and pastoring my first church. Didn't really have time to deal with the issues, so dealt with that. Got into my second church. Nothing. I had a lot of negative experiences in church, but they just reinforced my faith. Emotion. Okay. Hmm. Well, of course, it doesn't mean anything to you because you don't want to accept the one that you have. You don't want to accept that you have to prove your God. Okay, that allows you to avoid and dodge. Okay, it's dishonest. You're dodging. Okay, and I'm just going to call it. I'm tired of pretending it's not. Okay, it's a dodge, and it's dishonest. So, um, I don't know. I finally got into my congregational church, and that's when I really started to study the Bible and try to answer these questions of God's existence, whether the Bible was true, and quickly discovered that a lot of the things that theists think are good proof are not. Um, so, it's what the rest of this comment was about. It's kind of interesting that this person is trying to answer the problem of evil question that was brought up by I Am Beggar on Monday last week, a week ago, 2 weeks ago now. And his cut and paste part is the typical trope stuff. Okay. And it's all these things not having good answers that, you know, it's all of those thinking that there's no, there's no, there was no good answers for any of this stuff. And the answers provided that this guy tries to give are ones that I considered and had to reject. I find it funny um, with this question, why would a pastor turn atheist? As if there's something special about pastors. You have to assume some theology of being called by God, being some sort of thing, being real, in order to assume that the pastor is somehow different than any other human being on the planet. One of the things I can tell you from personal experience that being a pastor was no different than being any other human being. And now that I understand that that's just um, uh, the moral question, why do I need divine command theory? Okay, and what more good morality comes out of that? Okay, because then it's only good if God says it's good. Okay, I'm sorry, there's a bunch of moral standards. Your problem is if you've been indoctrinated to think that there's no moral standards out there without a God, okay, and that's just not true. Okay, there's plenty of moral standards. Is it in space? I mean, which God are we talking about? First of all, who's the one that gave the moral standard? And immediately, I'm going to get every religious type that has different faiths arguing about which God is the one who gave the moral standard, which just proves that there isn't one. Okay, there isn't a moral standard given by you. Got to prove there's a God to give it, and then you have to prove that He gave it. You don't have evidence for any of that. Okay, so you're no, I don't have a personal opinion. I actually have like studied morality, okay, like scientifically studied social constructs, morals. This is all evidence, okay. Sorry, I'm not trying to be a jerk, but we actually have better answers as human beings to the moral questions. Okay, and we've come up with better morality, certainly in the God of the Bible. I mean, at least human beings, some of us acknowledge that maybe slavery is a really, really bad idea. Okay, but the God of the Bible doesn't do that ever. Um, so, why did I leave the ministry in the end? No, I just couldn't find any good evidence. The idea of love your neighbor as yourself is a secular ethic. I'm sorry, do unto others as you would have to do unto you, as in every society. Okay, it is a secular ethic that religions like to steal. Okay, but treating people like you want to be treated, that's in every culture, every time. There's no evidence for that coming from a God. It's just something that human beings come up with because it's just a good moral ethic. It just is a good one. It doesn't matter. Well, if that's what your religion tells you, then you need to get a different religion because it's full of shit. Okay. So I'm sorry. The moral question is one of the reasons why I left the faith. Okay. So one of the reasons I left the ministry is dealing with moral questions and having better answers just as a human being and getting away from all that um, than the God of the Bible had. Okay, the God of the Bible doesn't have good moral answers. I have good. You say that it's not a good reason. I think it is a good reason. My issue with people who think that divine command theory is what's needed is you still haven't proven to me which God. Okay, you have to tell me which God is the one that actually exists and which one actually gave the morality. Give it to me. Um, sorry, there's no good reason for any of that then. So, in fact, this is one of the reasons why I left the faith. You bring it up, you're almost queuing me up. This is why I tell you, atheists, I'm reading your mail. Okay, because I've given all the answers. I've argued exactly the way that you have argued before when I was a theist. Okay, I already know all the arguments because I've made them. Okay, so you know, I mean, if we go back, the free will defense for morality doesn't work because then God is still responsible um, because He created the situation. Okay, it's like to me when I look at the Garden of Eden story, for instance, it's like okay, so God left an open container of bleach in the middle of things with a bunch of moral toddlers that don't know good and evil. But how would they not know good and evil already if they couldn't assess that, Eve makes a good and evil assessment to the serpent? Okay, that it's bad for us to eat of that tree. It's evil to eat us of that tree. So it's like, I don't know. Uh, actually, Trumpulator, I can give you an answer to that one. If he does know that who's going to heaven and hell, it doesn't really make a difference, does it? Okay, this is the problem with Calvinism. So no crickets, just not seeing the comment. But going back to why I don't believe is the problem of evil had a lot to do with it, and morality had a lot to do with it. Because I began to realize that God, who gives the commands of good and evil, does a lot of evil. Okay, and in fact, he even says so. I had this commenter basically make the defense that God isn't the author of evil, but that's not what God himself says in Isaiah 45:7. He says, I'm the one that creates evil. And it's the same flipping word, ra. It's the same Hebrew word that's pretty much used in the knowledge of good and evil. Okay, so in order to create the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, God had to know what evil was. He even says so. And he knew what it was going to do. Okay. Sorry. When you kill people just because they don't believe as you, they don't they don't believe as you, that's evil. That's a moral evil. Okay. God literally, I have done an entire series so far on when God kills, and God kills for some of the most petty, stupid little reasons. Okay. Thanks, Trumpulator. Yeah. Okay. But it's the thanks for clarifying. But yeah, I'm sorry. I can, from my assessment as my a human being, causing unnecessary harm to people because you're not persuasive enough to persuade people to your position. So your answer is to kill them. That's the actions of a terrorist. And God is a terrorist a lot in the Old Testament. He is, we debate subjective, objective evil around here a lot, but I think a good argument could be made that certain things are objectively wrong. So, yeah, I mean, sorry, God does a lot of moral evil. Okay, you just don't want to accept it. Say 9/11, people can be very mistaken and do evil in the name of God. Um, yes, exactly. I create disaster. Now that's a very I'm going to tell you as so that's a watered down version of Isaiah 45:7. If you get into it, the word Ra is used for evil, and it appears 700 times in the Old Testament, and it can be reflective of both calamity and moral evil, both. Okay, it's often used to describe the actions of men as evil. Okay, so you have that aspect. And so what you have, even with the free will defense that a lot of this theist used in this comment, and it's one of the reasons I left, is I realized that free will did not solve the problem of God being responsible for evil. He's the one who sets up the test. Okay, if he doesn't give the possibility of evil in the Garden of Eden in the first place, you know, he's done. And how does God escape culpability for that? Because it's like if I own a dog, for instance, that I know has a track record of going out and harming people, biting people, trying to kill them, whatever, and I don't keep that dog locked up, am I responsible for that dog's actions? Hell yes. And God unleashes evil on the world through these human beings, and somehow he's not responsible. Even with free will, I don't think you get rid of that. And that became a theological problem. I'm I get this all the time. You know, you're blaming God for evil. I'm like, I'm not blaming God for evil. I'm saying that the arguments for him not being responsible don't make a hell of a lot of sense. Um, so it's like, even if you allow for free will, you still have a problem given the nature of God. It's like every theist, you know, the problem of evil probably is one of the biggest reasons I couldn't resolve as a Christian, believing in the Abrahamic God, and I just couldn't get past it. And it's why I left. As a large part of it was why I've left the ministry. I had to leave it. Um, so I ended up being somebody who at that point realizes there was really no good answers, because I would not water down the problem of evil like a lot of apologists do. I don't water it down. And in fact, I make it as evil as possible just to counter that. You know, I've used the example of, you know, God sitting in the corner of the room while a woman is being sexually assaulted. He does this like thousands of times a day if God is real. Okay. It's not just that he knows about it, he's there. Okay. He knows the thoughts of the perpetrator, he knows the thoughts of the victim. You know, if the omni God is real, he watches that happen, knows the person has the intention of killing the woman in the end, and does nothing. If I'm in the same position, I would be considered an evil bastard, but somehow God gets off the hook. And this is the problem of evil. Okay. This is the problem of evil. Okay. And it's not just that, but the biblical God perpetrates genocide. He murders people. There's a passage in the scriptures where it's like, when these men are like, you know, sexually assaulting your women, know that I'm the one sexually assaulting them. You know, it does have it's a question of, you know, there is no benevolence to this God. And the greatest contradiction in scripture is the Old Testament God and the New Testament God. It's right there in your face. But the New Testament God is in many ways is worse, because the New Testament God through Jesus introduces us the concept of this final justice where everybody gets to burn forever at the end. And Jesus is the one who introduces that concept. It's funny, I've watched a lot of apologists deal with the problem of hell, and they never deal with Jesus's story of the rich man and Lazarus. It's like they avoid it because they know that it's going to kill them. They know that for a fact. And because it's like, this is Jesus not telling a parable, he's telling a story of what seems to be real. And God, it drives me insane, because every time I want an apologist to deal with the topic of hell, here's this thing, I think it's Luke 16 of hell. And it's like, hell killed my faith too, for this very reason, because I would look at that story and go, Jesus isn't telling a parable here. He's telling a story as if it's real. Okay, this is something that he as God would have seen, okay, in the past. It's something he's remembering. And there's a lot of interesting things about, yeah, Abraham has a bosom is the most shocking part of it. Oh, yeah, Abraham was trans. Um, I could start that theology right there. So, but yeah, I look at that story and nobody wants to deal with the reality of that story, that Jesus is probably describing something he would have seen. Um, he's just, And like you have, the rich man says all these things, and God's response is very callous. Okay. Um, I don't know. It's just no, I've never really seen any apologist when they talk about the subject of hell. And this was my problem when I was a theist and I was wrestling with these questions, and why I'm no longer a pastor and now an atheist, is nobody really wanted to deal with that story. Not in truth, because there's a couple of things that also contradict Christian theology in there. Like the rich man isn't there because he didn't accept Jesus. If you read the story, he's there because he received good things in life and had all these good things happen to him. So now he has to roast eternally for it, which brings up all kinds of interesting um, subjects about God's justice at that point. That makes it, I think the problem with the story, and the reason why apologists don't want to deal with it, is it makes God's justice even worse, because there's no thought of accepting Jesus as your personal savior in that story. Um, Lazarus is in Abraham's bosom simply because he received all kind of evil things in life, and so now he's gets all the good stuff, and the other guy received good things in life, so now he gets all the bad stuff. And the problem with both of those is there's kind of an eternity. Okay, so you do something in temporal existence that affects your eternity, which is a big problem that nobody ever wants to really deal with. And every time I'd read an apologist back when I was that, it it created a problem for me in my theology. And I now realize what theology is. It's it's the larger branch of apologetics that apologetics draws from. You're always trying to justify God. It's very much about trying to keep people in the faith. It's not about, theology and apologetics have, if you think those arguments are convincing to me, the atheist, you're going to be sadly disappointed. Um, what ends up happening most of the time is that they just don't work. And so theology just becomes this going around in circles kind of thing. And I've said it before, you solve one problem in theology and two more crop up. Okay. It's kind of like, it's like whack-a-mole. Okay. Only there's 5,000 holes and thousands of moles coming up. Okay. So yeah, I don't know. I'm just this, and then of course this person brings up all the martyrs. Oh, how many times do I have to deal with this? How many times do I have to deal with the fact that there's no historical evidence that's really good that 11 apostles even died in the first place? Um, yeah, it just picture, Martin, a whack-a-mole game with a thousand holes and 500 moles pop up at one time, and that's theology. Once you solve a problem or two, there's 10 more that you create, and that's because then God is created by humans, and because there's so many inconsistencies with the natural God, it just yeah. Yeah, Big Max, you're right. Because the real problem is when you corner an apologist on where they got their information from, they probably got it from another apologist. It's stories that have been passed on. It's the very one I'm talking about, the 11, apostles dying for their faith. Where did we get that information? Well, it crops up, I don't know, 4th, 5th century, okay, after Jesus, when the church is more established. And now people are asking a lot of questions about the faith. Well, what happened to the apostles? Oh, they all died for their faith. Um, you know, um, and they bring this up. Would you die for a lie? And I'm like, there's a lot of people that are very sincerely mistaken that have done some really horrible things. 9/11 is a good example. Um, of somebody being very sincere about their belief and that leading to a lot of death. Including a person's own. I mean, martyrdom is an easy thing when you really think about it. You just have to sincerely believe something is going to come about because of your death, and away you go. Yeah, we see what you see with theology and apologetics is this constant evolution of people reinventing um, God in their own image most of the time. Um, so it, I don't know. I don't have, I have, no answer to that other than to say you don't have any evidence for it. I think it's even, was it Sean McDowell? Is even he did his doctoral dissertation on the witnesses, the apostles and whether they died for their faith. And the best he could do was four of them having quote unquote evidence that they even died, and none of them have evidence that they died for their faith. Even James in Acts is just killed by Herod. There is no story of him standing before Herod and Herod going, recant your faith or die. There's none of that. He just kills him, and then he sees it pleases the Jews, so he grabs a few more apostles and decides to kill them. Um, it's not a, you know, it's very easy to be mistaken in your belief and die for something. Okay. There's plenty of stories of martyrs in all faiths where people died for very mistaken things that they thought was true. Um, so that was another part that he tried to bring up. I've heard of all the apostles. Eh, I have to ask you theists that do come here, if you're watching this later, I was 20 years as a minister. I got degrees in this stuff. Why would you think that I hadn't heard something? Okay. Especially if it's something so basic as the 11 martyrs out of 12 story, or this person quotes Bible verses to me as if I haven't read them 100 times. Um, and it's just a real puzzling thing to me. Like somehow, because I'm no longer a pastor, I lost all that knowledge, just fell out of my head for some reason. I used to preach the gospel. So when you give me the gospel as a response, it's like I already see the flaws in it. Mhm. Yeah. They, the thing about it is, I bet you every year I could pull out a story somewhere in the news where somebody mistakenly died for something they believed that wasn't true. Okay, and whether it's religious, political, or whatever. I mean, we have literally wars going on around the world because of mistaken beliefs. Okay, yeah. Well, yeah, there's a lot of wannabes, Big Macs, but there's also people that are deep into this that still use those same arguments. Okay, they're still using the same arguments they used 20 years ago. Um, that was my disappointment. This is why I left the faith. There's another reason why a pastor turns atheist. The apologetics is in its horrible state. It was in a horrible state back in 1990s, and it hasn't gotten any better. Okay. It's just like, holy crap. And, this person gives me all these verses about how the human heart is evil. And it's like he totally avoids all the times that God says, one time God literally says he does evil. He created it. And then, you know, on and on it goes. But I have noted that as I've watched translations come out, that they have really watered down that verse. That's tends to be the case with Isaiah 45:7. I know Winger, for instance, tries to change the definition of the word raw in order to, while you're taking it out of context, that usual argument. And then there's other apologists that take a different tack on that one. Thanks, Jova. I appreciate that so much. Uh, but the other tactic is to take that verse and basically say, well, yeah, God creates evil, and then do what I. M. Becker did, which is saying, well, we needed evil to come in the world to build a better world. Okay. And then the argument of, so, it's just, it's that, that continual, got to make up excuse for the Bible. Um, you know, in this one, he conveniently like brings up the verse about how God's thoughts are above ours. Well, then how do you guys then tell me so much about what God thinks? Okay, and what's really on his mind? If his thoughts are higher than everybody else's, then he's higher than yours, so you don't know anything about God either. There's all kinds of things in the Bible like that that lead me to walking away from being a pastor to being an atheist. Um, you know, don't lean onto your own understanding. That's a pretty good one to get people indoctrinated to just accepting what the religion says. Yes, PRP, there is an entire series called My Deconversion Story for 2023. I think it's a playlist. You can actually watch it. There's like 15 of them, but it doesn't have a flipping bit to do with my experiences. It has to do with 25 years of struggle trying to make the Bible make sense, which it doesn't. Um, you know, just because the Bible claims that the human mind is this way does not necessarily prove it's true. My problem with the Bible is it doesn't, in the end, is it doesn't line up with reality. I've done this before of the things that you have to believe if you're going to be a biblically based Christian. Okay, if you're going to be a biblically based Christian and you read the first 3 chapters of the Bible, Genesis 1 through 3, you have to believe that light existed without having a sun or a moon or any other light source. You have to believe in magic. You're the one that believes that God created something out of nothing. I don't believe that. That's a trope attacked by apologists that don't always apparently just take titles seriously and don't read books. Because I've read Krauss's book, and his conclusion is nothing isn't nothing; it's something. And so he doesn't believe that we came out of nothing either. But you have to believe that God by magic does a conjuration spell and creates the universe. So creation is more ex nihilo than anything that, like, the great expansions theory, commonly called the Big Bang theory, would say. Um, so there's that aspect. You have to believe in a flat Earth. I mean, the whole rash of flat earthers is largely a response right now to the fact that the Bible absolutely describes, particularly the Old Testament, describes the world over and over as a flat disk with a dome with windows where the rain comes, and that the sun and the moon are inside this dome providing light for day and night. Um, you have to believe that the world is on foundations, and that it's there's really a large amount of very inconvenient parts. Yes, perhaps, yes, Astra, yes, you are correct. It's just there's so much in the Bible that is very, very inconvenient. It's so wrong. It doesn't line up with reality. And then, of course, I come to the Christian message. Well, why would you discard Christianity? Well, one, the gospel doesn't make any sense, even as presented by the Gospels and by the New Testament writers. Yes, I forgot. You're right, Paul. The earth is stationary. It doesn't move. Um, there's, when you look at it, it's just, there's so many claims that the Bible makes, and the way it describes reality is just doesn't line up with the Bible at all. Reality and the Bible just don't mix. I often laugh when I see, like, apologists say, well, science and faith can be cohabit. And I'm like, they make completely different claims and use completely different source of evidence. Yes, why would God return on a white horse? That's problematic. I mean, the whole book of Revelation really reads like somebody took magic mushrooms before they wrote it. So, I mean, and then the Christian message, God sacrificing himself to appease himself for the rules that he created. It's like, why? Okay, that just doesn't make any sense. And the whole idea of blood sacrifice doesn't make any sense. Why does that do anything? Uh, yeah, over and over, the more I looked at the claims of the Bible, the more it didn't line up. And it took me a long time. I'm going to tell you, the reason I stayed in Christianity was the emotional reasons. It's funny. There came a point where intellectual integrity and truth meant more to me. No, I haven't, but LSD or whatever, the way people describe their trips, it lines up. Okay. But the more I tried to line this stuff up, it just didn't work. And there came a point where my intellectual integrity said, this can't be true. And my deconversion moment was actually, I found the date, May 27th, 2015 is where I left Christianity. Um, so you recommend it? Okay. I hear there's some drinks out there that combine stuff now. That might actually be a better one. Hey, Alex. Um, but I got to a point where I'm preaching on May 27th, 2015, and this quote from Dan Barker is going through my head. Sin is an imaginary problem with an imaginary solution. And I'm trying to prove that wrong. Okay, I'm trying to prove it wrong. If I ever get to meet Dan, I'm going to shake his hand and thank him for that one. But at the time, it was just bugging the hell out of me. And I got up to preach, and I was preaching from 1 Corinthians 5 and trying to justify how sin causes problems in the church. And I'm preaching away. And before I started that sermon, I offered up my last prayer. My last prayer to Jesus and God was, okay, you got to show me while I'm preaching this sermon how Dan is wrong, because I can't find out where he's wrong. And I was preaching that message. I got done. I sat down, and I remember it. No answer, no revelation, nothing. My entire faith in God hinges on that. And that's the way the prayer was led up. I said, my entire faith is hinging on this question right now. No answer. And I sat down, and it was one of the most miserable moments of my life, because I suddenly realized, I said, Jesus, Ed, and I'm paraphrasing myself because I've said this many times, but I was sitting there and my whole thoughts were, holy shit, Ed, you're a fraud. You actually make your living by telling people what they want to hear, and you're selling an imaginary solution to an imaginary problem. Now, up to that time, I didn't realize that. But at that moment, I'm like, no, I'm done. But I was trapped. Trapped in the pulpit is an apt description at that point, because I didn't know how to do anything else. And so, so I don't know. It was pretty miserable at that moment. And I didn't give up on God yet. I changed my concept of God and thought, well, maybe the deists were right. And I held on to that for about a year. And then in June of 2016, I gave up on that and became an atheist, because I couldn't find that any of the claims for the existence of God were true. To me, deism is nothing more than religion light, that we're trying to keep all the slightly good things about belief in God together and hold it together. And I just couldn't hold that. And that's how a pastor becomes an atheist. It's called studying the Bible over a 25-year period and realizing that it's a problem. It's more of a problem than a solution. So when I get back to the problem of evil, now I have a much better solution. The world is the way it is. Okay. It's not perfect. It's not created by any deities. It's not, it just is. And we may never know the real origin story. And the proper answer to the origin of the universe is, I don't know. And that's the proper human response. That's the most honest answer I can give. But we do know kind of how this iteration started to form and how it developed. We do know how the diversity of life is. That's an established fact with evolution. We do have a lot of established understandings of morality by studying evolutionary morality. I've read a couple of books on that. And being a social species, a lot of our morals make sense. And that they're growing and getting better in some places is also good. But it still brings up the questions of subjective and objective, which I'm still wrestling with. But I now wrestle with the questions of life without a God, and I'm okay with that. I really am. I got over the ego trip that is religion, because it is a big ego trip that you're special, that God has called you. I mean, holy cow, does Christianity have that? Islam has that too. Pretty much all the Abrahamic religions have this idea of you're the specially chosen of God and thus better than everybody else. And no matter how much you try to, that was something that always on a personal level bothered me, but now I don't have to deal with that anymore. So why did I become an atheist? Because getting rid of religion and God has done me a world of good on an intellectual level, being more intellectually honest, and on an emotional level, because now I actually deal with my problems. I take responsibility for my own actions. Okay, I'm not sitting there saying the devil made me do it. I'm not saying that God created the situation and therefore I'm trapped by it. I don't feel that way about things anymore. And 9 years of deconverting and moving forward have made me have a better life. And I love you theists to death. That's why I'm so patient with you, because I used to be you. The person who wrote this comment, that could have been me 10 years ago, to be honest. 10, 20 years ago, I would have written a comment very much like this. And it's like, I'm trying to help you apologists out when you're dealing with atheists, because you seem to do it wrong. You do it wrong a lot. Here's the problem. I like this person's approach in the sense they're asking me questions instead of just assuming stuff in a lot of respects. But they still assume that I don't know something. And it's like, after a degree in biblical studies and a degree in theology and 20 years of ministry, preaching from the Bible for 30 years, I kind of know the book. Okay. What do I think of an all-loving God? I don't think he exists. I can't justify the way moral evil is done to people and an all-loving God. If I conclude that God is all-loving, then he doesn't have the power to stop it or the knowledge to stop it, or isn't everywhere present. You have to, if God is completely benevolent, then all his other attributes can't be all. Okay, there's something deficient about God if he's benevolent, because as a good person, if I see something going wrong, I try to stop it. Okay. Evil persists because good men and women do nothing. Okay, is a great quote. Bad things happen because people sit on the sidelines and don't do anything. So that's kind of, I just don't see a benevolent creator at all. If there is a God, he doesn't give a shit. Which I don't, that one doesn't make sense anymore, because there's alternative explanations to why things are the way they are. I don't need a God to explain things anymore. Alex, I'm going to tell you, the hardest thing I deal with is family. So that gets where the emotions come in, because I love my kids, and I love my mother. My mother's still very much a theist, still believes a lot of the apologist tropes. I don't know, my daughter, not quite as much, but she has her own weirdnesses to her because of thinking that faith is a virtue, which I don't think it is. My other kids are back and forth. My grandkids, they're little. So it's that's probably the hardest reality. I'm glad. I will say this to you, Alex. Your father's still alive, and mine's gone, and it's been gone 30 years. And I still miss him, Christian though he was, because he was a good dad. Okay, good dad. Loved me very much, and I think he would have been that way, religion or no religion. My parents are kind of weird, because they used to be 1960s liberal types that became conservative Christians. I still haven't tried to. I keep trying to figure that out, but so there's that. But yeah, that's kind of most of the story of why a pastor turns atheist, is just studying the Bible, the claims of Christianity, the claims of religion in general, and realizing there's no good evidence for any of it. There's a lot of opinion. So They weren't hippies, but my mom was definitely a feminist, 1960s feminist. Um, and my dad, well, he's probably your typical happy heathen. Just and they didn't change really until I came along. Like, I think what it is parents back then thought, "Oh, I've got a kid now, so now I need to get religious so my kid can get the morality." The problem is that decision was pretty detrimental to me long term when you really look about it. I know a lot of you say, "Hey, Ed, your experiences like help us out, okay, now, and it's very helpful." And I get that, but on a personal level, I think I would have rather been a rocket scientist. Okay, I was really when I was in high school, I was very much into engineering and science and building stuff, and I'm kind of getting back into that a little bit on the side as a way to relax. But um, uh, I am a libertarian, which means I'm not completely liberal on some issues. Um, Paul, I look back at it and what I was very good at math. I was very good at science. That's part of the problem is I know what science actually says. Okay, and so when I see apologists misrepresented, I'm like, my high school level of science understanding beats that every day. Um, so there's that. Um, so it's kind of I don't know. I look back at that time and try to understand it because I was little, I'm just a kid. But I have no beefs about my childhood from a certain point of view. Being an only child, my parents had a lot of time for me and they were always available when I had a question. You can type like him. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of interesting that you bring that up. But no, I look at family and give this advice to you, those of you that are deconverting right now and struggling with your faith or leaving it altogether about family. You have to ask the question, what's more important to you, being right or loving your family that loves you back? And I've kind of sided with the second part instead of the first because I love my daughter. I love my mom, love my kids, love my grandkids, and I'd rather have a relationship with them than be right about everything. And so you kind of put that on the back burner. I do know that my older grandkids are getting old enough where they're starting to ask questions that annoy their parents about this stuff. So we'll see what happens there long term. Um, so there's that. Are there any other comments this week? I don't know. I do have to agree with Datsu on one commenter. If you're going to comment, it's really helpful if you put all your comments on a video in the same place. There's not 5 or 6 of them. Makes it much more difficult to deal with. I think I dealt with the one comment about Luke, the comments about Luke last week, so I'll deal with that one. But a lot of Jason Henderson made a great point about church tradition is often what apologists use. They're unwittingly using church tradition and thinking it's established fact. That happens a lot, particularly with the martyrs thing, the 11 martyrs for apostles being martyred. That's a very church tradition thing. There's not a lot of history to that. So there's that aspect. The problem of evil got yelled at about a lot. Somebody had to be insulting to me. um, yeah, Martin, you have to ask yourself the question, what's more valuable to you? Being right. I mean, my intellectual integrity is enough that if they ask me point blank if I'm an atheist, I'll tell them yes. Um, I think the real issue that you have to realize about deconversion is it's a decision that you come to yourself. You may have influences on that, and that's true for your family as well. Um, I look at like my daughter, for instance, she is where I was 25 years ago. Okay. And so maybe in 25 years, she'll have the same experience about her faith. I don't know. Maybe it'll be sooner because of my influence. I don't know. Um, You really have to ask yourself that question hard. What is the most important thing to you now that you realize if there, there's no God in your mindset. So what's important now? What's important in life? Um, becomes a much bigger question and one you have to answer practically. One of my things that I wrestled with after my deconversion is what the hell is wrong with me? And, you know, after, 4 or 5 years of therapy, oh, Ed, you might be autistic and you might be hypersensitive. And that's what's causing your anxiety and depression. Oh, okay. you know, Christianity never gave me that answer. I can tell you that. I think, uh, yeah, I don't have a hatred for Christian hypocrisy. I just have a distaste for it. I think hatred's a real strong word. I'm when I say that I'm very have a lot of empathy to people that are still in the faith, that's genuine for me. Okay, you can take that as disingenuine or whatever, but it's real. I know it's genuine because I used to be there. Okay, and I know what it's like to be indoctrinated, and I know what it's like to, like the whole tenor of the problem of evil argument, for instance, is such an indoctrinated thing. I mean, think about it. Most churches have this where the pastor will get up and say, God is good. And the congregation responds all the time. And all the time, God is good. That's that is indoctrination from the pulpit, probably every week. And so when they look at the Bible, they can't see how God does evil and they can't see how human beings do anything right. Because there's stories where, I think one of the interesting ones in my When God Kills series is the guy who tries to steady the ark when it's falling over. He's trying to do something good. He doesn't want the ark to fall on the ground and get broken. And yet God kills him for it, for disrespect. And that story should bother the hell out of you if you're a theist. It should really crank you. Okay. But for a lot of people, they're so indoctrinated in, well, he did something wrong and God did the right thing by killing him. They are so into that they can't look at the Bible any differently. It's the story. I'm sure it's in my playlist of when God kills you for touching an ark or something to that effect. So, but yeah, he literally just tries to right the ark and God kills him for it. Because you're not supposed to touch the ark. That's divine command theory. That's absolutist divine morality. That God, whatever God does is right, and whatever evil is done by humans. That's totally indoctrination. You can't. Sorry, yeah, it's Uzziah. Yeah, that's right. The story of Uzziah. Um, so, but it's a case where the guy's just trying to do the right thing and make sure the ark doesn't fall over, and all he does is touch it. So, it's that. I mean, you start looking at the Joe O'Shea just brought it up, the story of Job. Um, when you consider Job and you get rid of the idea that God is always good and humanity is always wrong, I mean, but even in the story of Job, his friends debate this question. What did you do wrong, Job, that you're experiencing all this stuff? And Job is like, I didn't do anything, and that's the problem. So it's just it's a hilarious story when you get rid of the idea of God being the good guy. And even with Satan, um, Satan is just this interesting character because he doesn't do many evil acts. This is just one of them, and it's kind of implied that he's the one that killed Job's 10 kids. But how does it make up for losing 10 of your children by giving you 10 more? Okay, as if they're just replaceable parts. Okay, I mean it's not a question of when you look at the problem. This is God allowing this to happen. unnecessarily, because if he's omniscient in the classical sense, he already knows what Job's going to do. Okay, he doesn't need to do the test. That was my whole thing with I.M. Beggar and his whole AI engineers. It's like the difference between the AI engineers and God is God knows the result of the test before he runs it. Okay, it's like, yeah, if the God of the Bible exists, he is evil. Okay, he's as I think it's he's the most unpleasant character of all fiction. Dan Barker puts it, and yeah, Trumpulator, I get you. Okay, I get why you're. Don't get me wrong, dude. I get why atheists stay angry. Okay, I remember watching. Oh gosh, it was the Amazing Atheist responding to Pastor Joe, and Pastor Joe says, first of all, you need to understand that the A in atheist is angry, and the Amazing Atheist response, well, you got me there. Okay, I absolutely get it. I absolutely get it. So yeah, but nah, I can't unsee what God is in the Bible anymore. And when you look at the way God kills people, and it's directly him responsible, and you start to look at the God of the Bible, the reasons that he kills people. Like, people are grumbling and complaining about something, so he brings snakes to bite them and kill them because they're grumbling. Quit grumbling and complaining, or I'm going to kill you. Okay. And people, well, but he provided the bronze serpent to heal them. I'm like, he wouldn't have needed to do the bronze serpent if he had any sense of justice. Okay, in the first place, there's no graduated sense of justice in the Old Testament God. He just kind of, it's either you live or you die, depending on what you do. And that's kind of kicked off in the New Testament with Jesus, with the heaven or hell thing. That's the whole problem with this. I can at least buy like paganism, because paganism will give you 25 different afterlives depending on how you lived your life. And that actually makes a hell of a lot more sense than one or the other, good or evil, heaven or hell. Because it actually looks at the nuance of how you lived. I mean, because I give my story of evil, the woman being sexually assaulted and then killed. If the person who perpetrated that on her gives their heart to Jesus on their deathbed, he goes to heaven. But if she never did that, she goes to hell. Okay, and so that contradicts Luke 16 story, where it says, the rich man is where he's at because of all the good things that happen in his life. And because the bad things all happen, that's why Lazarus is in Abraham's bosom. That's what it says. That's the interpretation by Jesus himself, the character of Jesus himself. And so that contradicts Luke 16, and yet the gospel does this all the time. It's a contradiction in theology that I really honestly, genuinely think that the reason why most apologists don't deal with Luke 16 or whatever it is, it's just, have I ever considered bringing back the pagan pulpit? You know what? That's a great segue into the announcement. If God exists, is any more important than creation? That would depend on the God. Okay, which God are we talking about? Human beings have created so many. Okay, that you got to establish that A, God exists, and B, which God we're talking about before you can even ask that question. Because the nature of that God compared to the nature of creation would be the issue. So I can't answer that question without proof. Which God are we talking about? So it's not a dodge, but it's a great segue in what's coming up. I took this week off. Just for any of you YouTube content creators, if you take a week off, just prepare for your ad revenue to drop, because it did for the week. But you got to keep going. So yeah, Michael also asks a good question. More important for whom? That's another good question. What do you mean? What do you mean by more important? there's a lot of assumptions behind that question that you haven't really demonstrated one way or the other. Um, so as far as the channel goes, I'm probably going back to a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday schedule for videos, and then we'll live stream on Saturday like today. Um, I'm this week I'm reacting to a very young apologist who's just done a few videos, but he did one that misrepresents the claims that atheists make. And so that's kind of what Monday reactions are about. It's like when apologists make claims about, um, you know, they make arguments for the existence of God, or they misrepresent atheism, or they misrepresent deconversion. Those are those reaction videos on Monday. And I'm trying to make those a little bit shorter, um, dealing with shorter stuff or pulling out parts of videos instead of just doing the whole one. Um, I know. I get it, Martin. They always misrepresent atheists. Atheism, it gets to my Friday reactions because that's where I'm going to put my other reaction videos on Friday. And that one, I'm kind of building off the idea of reacting to preachers, reacting to. I also want to start reacting to evangelism on the street. So you might see Banana Man a couple of times and a few others that do that. People, I harken back to my days in Bible college where my first year was spent on the street witnessing in a city. And so, yeah, preachers are fun. Street witnessing can be fun. But I also, this may be hard for me because, okay, all right. Yeah. Well, Banana Man's fun though. He's fun. Okay. I know some of you are triggered by Ray, but he is so hilarious now. I mean, I can't get over how hilarious this apologetics is anymore and how funny it is. So, and then I think I'm going to pick up a book by an apologist, and the rotation on Friday will be to also talk about it like a chapter in one of their books. So it'll be a little bit different reaction on Friday for that one, but so that might be good. I got to rotate things to keep myself interested. Otherwise, this stuff bores me to tears after a while. And then Tuesday will be the three Bible studies I'm running right now. And Thursday is going to be purely questionable witnesses. The morality one I'm going to table. I'm going to come back to that one because I'm wrestling with so many questions, and somebody wrote me a bunch of things, and I'm like, I am still struggling whether objective moral rules can come out of subjective understanding of reality, or whether subjective morality is even a thing. Because if there is no objective morality and it's all subjective, then morality becomes a completely different thing than I thought it was. And so I'm wrestling with that part. So I don't really want to discuss morality other than what I normally do until I get that part. So Thursday is going to be purely questionable witnesses, and with any luck, we are going to hit the Christmas narrative in that one at Christmas time. So that'll be fun. And Tuesday, though, I am going to interrupt for October. I think this Tuesday, on Tuesday, I'll be doing a video, and I'm going to be calling it the Scary Bible in honor of Halloween, October. And so I'm going to do the stories of witches, ghosts, and goblins that are in the Bible. So we can talk about those. That'll be fun. Hey, graphics. I don't know. I'm just trying to rotate things a little bit for me because it keeps me going. A lot of what this week was about is I just did not recover very well from my illness, and I was trying to do content creation, and it was stressing me out way much more than usual because of all the things that were going on physically, which were, it's amazing how when you get out of this stuff, how much you realize you're one person and everything affects everything else. Yeah, I agree with that, Michael Wolff. I think that's the basis of my morality right now, plus virtue ethics thrown in there. But there's something about the whole subjective objective question that bothers the hell out of me. And I'm still trying to figure out what that is. Um, Thanks, Fred, for coming by. I appreciate you, man. But yeah, I needed the week off. I really just needed. If you ask me where I was in Skyrim, to be honest, most of the time. Just reacquainting myself with an old friend and with all the new DLC and the anniversary edition and some mods. Just I was just traveling the land of Skyrim in my alter ego form and thinking about things. And I just needed the week off, and I feel so much better mentally and physically right now. So I think it was a good call. But I'll be back to content creation this week. And we'll hit our Frank Turek Disciple on Monday, the first episode of Scary Bible. On Tuesday, we'll hit Questionable Witnesses. I'll be talking about John's introduction. And then on Friday, I have a preacher that I've had in the hopper that I want to react to. He's got a 5-minute sermon, and I'm going to react to that sermon. So that'll be that. And then we'll live stream again next Saturday. So I think that's all for me this week. Thanks for stopping by, everybody. I appreciate all of you. Thanks, Jova, again for the donation. I appreciate that. It's just it's been I think I'm in a better frame of mind and everything, so we'll be going forward with that. Not a zombie from the hopper, huh? I don't know. We'll talk about zombies and Scary Bible, I'm sure. The Bible that inspired Halloween. Oh, thank you very much, Jova. I appreciate that. 10 of you just got memberships thanks to her, so give her your thanks. Yeah, I'm heading this new content direction, so thank you very much. Appreciate that. And you too, Jova. I appreciate you. And so, as always, live your best life. You only get one go around. That's the reality of it. And so make sure you're taking all your time, money, and opportunities and using them to build up yourself and the people you love and care for and to make this a better world. You'd be happier if you do. Don't waste it on trappings of religion and faith. That's a dead end. I speak from experience and from knowledge. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate all of you. You guys are great. I appreciate all my members. I think ASHO is getting close to a year membership, summertime in October, I think. So thank you very much. For those of you that arrive late, you can always start the video over once I'm done. So it's all good. You'll hear it. But thank everybody. Thanks, Greg. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate all of you. You guys are awesome. And that's it for me. So thanks for stopping by, and I will catch you all next time.